Hallucinogenic drugs, hypnosis, electric shocks to the brain.
Stop it, please, I beg you!
Some of the methods used in secret CIA mind control experiments.
There are many theories as to what The Shining is really about, from the faking of the moon landing to Native American genocide and the Holocaust.
Now, if he did fake the Apollo moon landing, then he probably has really deep connections into the intelligence world. Why are there these gigantic continuity errors in this movie?
The occulted meaning has to be comprehensible. It's just hidden, usually in a very systematic way, so that it could be understood by someone coming along later on who knows what the real meaning is supposed to be.
We believe that there's something even more sinister lurking beneath the surface of this masterful film.
So Lookout Mountain Hotel looked a lot like the Overlook Hotel.
You realise that there's no such thing as coincidences like that.
As Lookout Mountain Studios, ran by the Air Force.
That told the story of nuclear weapons testing by the United States.
Of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, the Air Force was known to be the most excited, the most turned on by MKUltra and its prospects.
Reportedly, there were more films made at Lookout Mountain than at all the other film studios in Hollywood.
We really don't know what these famous film directors were being recruited for, what project or whatever. Was it the moon landing?
The CIA's MKUltra programs were admitted to the public in 1975, 5 years before the release of The Shining.
These experiments were done without the informed consent of the patients.
Look at some UFO cases, and the things that are reported tells me that MKUltra is likely being applied.
In my MKUltra mind control experience, I was taken to various military, NASA, and DARPA installations for sophisticated mind control programming.
Walt Disney, Marilyn Monroe, James Stewart, Cary Grant, Ronald Reagan. Nobody really knows what they were doing up there.
As well as high-ranking military and Department of Defense personnel.
What people don't realize is that many of the people that worked with Kubrick also worked with Kennedy. This is actually the smoking gun proving that Kubrick was working with the government.
These were all CIA-sponsored experiments.
I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in.
And putting little symbolic, cryptic clues and Easter eggs pertaining to the fact that they're still doing it.
These clues include a hidden swastika in the background of the gold room.
What was the setup, what it was being told, and realize that it was a lie all along.
But right there in the narrative, in the dialogue, they're telling you that this was a very real program coming out of those nice folks at the CIA.
Here's Johnny!
Welcome back to Raised by Giants. Another amazing episode here this evening. We are live. Welcome everyone in the chat. Good to see you guys and any channel members or moderators out there today. We have a very exciting show for everyone here. And he's in the brand new documentary, A Clockwork Shining, which you just watched the trailer for on Amazon Prime Video that some of you may have already watched. It's only been out for around 2 weeks. Actually, I think that this is on the money 2 weeks. Yeah, it came out a day before the election. So yeah, it's 2 weeks. 2 weeks today. So here on this 2-week anniversary. But it's had an amazing response so far. The link is in the description and it's pinned to the top of the chat. If you haven't seen it, please go and watch it after this show is over and help support independent filmmakers. Hollywood is dead. It's up to us to make good content and original concepts. So without further ado, he's been employed by the FBI. He is an inactive reserve officer in the Air Force, for which he served as special agent and then worked as a counterterrorism consultant for 6 years following military service. He's an author, researcher, writer, and investigator. He's in my brand new documentary, A Clockwork Shining, on Amazon Prime Video and Apple TV Plus. Walter Bosley, welcome back to the show. How's it going, my friend?
Hey, Ryder, it's going great. Good to see you.
It's really good to see you, my friend. So you got a chance to watch the documentary. It's had a really good response. What did you think of your part in this movie? Well, first off, what do you think of the movie as a whole, I guess?
Well, I got to tell you, I loved it. And just as I've told people elsewhere, you and Jay did not tell me, I told you guys this, did not tell me what your hypothesis was of the film. And you wanted it to be a kind of a surprise. So even though I'm in it and you interviewed me, I didn't know what you were proposing. And wow, it's the one that works better than any other theory that's come along. It just rings true. So outstanding job, Ryder. You really nailed it. Absolutely.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I worked really hard on it, and putting everything together and organizing is really taxing, being a filmmaker and taking it all on yourself. So I appreciate that and appreciate your support. So pretty much what we talk about in the movie, we talk about a lot. It's really Stanley Kubrick and The Shining and A Clockwork Orange wrapped up and kind of disguised as a bunch of other different things. It's a lot of different topics in there, and people that have talked to me and, told me what they thought of the film, they're basically like, I've been doing this for a really long time. I thought that I was awake, I thought that I knew about some of these things, but the way that you presented in this movie, it's still like shocking and mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
And we talk about Lookout Mountain Air Force Base in California that was right in Laurel Canyon and all that area. And Mark Devlin really brings out that whole aspect of it and all the films that were made. Have you done any research or anything looking into Lookout Mountain and the things that may or may not have been going on there? Because it's reported that there were more films made at Lookout Mountain Studio than all of Hollywood up until that point, and most of them are still classified to this very day.
Yeah, Dave McGowan talks about it a bit in Weird Scenes in Laurel Canyon, that excellent book, which is a fascinating read and a good companion to any examination of MK Ultra applied to the entertainment industry and the arts. I highly recommend it. My awareness of what the Air Force was doing with films and things like that was more along the lines of what I learned about AVIS, which was the audiovisual command of the U.S. Air Force. And interestingly enough, the headquarters, which makes sense to be in California, but the headquarters was out here at what is now former Norton Air Force Base, which you can see the flight line from my roof. And it is now San Bernardino International Airport, but the Avis building is still there. The Avis organization was the one that had invited, I believe, Robert Emenegger, the UFO author, Jacques Vallée, and Linda Moulton Howe out to Norton to watch films of alleged, ET landings. And what I found interesting was I only found this out, years later, but in the early 80s, I was in a Super 8 filmmakers club. Okay. And the president of the club was a guy named Keith Shartle. Well, years later, I found out that his father worked at Avis and was the civilian supervisor or one of the top dogs at this Avis unit that was out here. And he's identified as one of the Air Force folks involved with inviting Jacques Vallée and Linda Moulton Howe and Emenegger to see these films. And I thought, well, that's an interesting synchronicity. And one better on that was back in 81, I think, 81 or 82, Keith Shartle, Paul's son, had told me that he went to work for a company called DreamQuest, and DreamQuest was started by some guys who got their start from Douglas Trumbull on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And there's been a legend going around, and I can throw my 2 cents in, but because I heard about this over 40 years ago, was that the accountant had told the guys that founded DreamQuest that government money went into Close Encounters. Okay. And, later when I learned that who Keith's dad was and his connection to this whole UFO stuff. And then we did learn that I think the budget of Close Encounters was X million, 30 million, something like that. And we learned that under the Carter presidency, that exact amount was approved by the government towards the production company. So it looks like the historical record backs up what Keith had told me about Close Encounters of the Third Kind being financed by the U.S. government. And, if you want to throw in the extra little spice that Spielberg's career, it's like he had somebody looking down on him and grease the skids and open doors. Could it be, connected with then how he got that money and how he was able to make Close Encounters? Was he encouraged to make Close Encounters by the U.S. government? For whatever reason, it could have been a perception management thing all along, but that's my extent. There's my extent of the knowledge of the weird skullduggery going on with the Air Force media. I never, as an agent, even when I was in Los Angeles for 2 years, my first assignment, I never had to go to this Air Force studio out there. I never had anything that crossed my path with it.
Well, it probably would have been shut down by the time that you were in service. What do you think of? Do you think that, because you're talking about Jacques Vallée and Linda Moulton Howe getting these videotapes of UFOs and showing them? Do we know if those were, what kind of videos those were?
It was filmed. It was filmed. They had to come out to the base, according to their story. They had to come out to the base and watch the film projected for them. There was an
by the military. The military was showing them this.
Oh yeah, they had to come out
okay.
to Norton, and Paul Shartle and this other guy, I believe an officer, active duty member, were the ones who, facilitated this viewing. And I think it includes, Linda Moulton Howe, Linda, I've met her, so I'm going to call her Linda instead of repeating the name over and over. I believe Linda said that's when she saw the so-called Holloman base landing video, that one we've heard about for years.
Infamous one that no one can seem to figure it out.
Yeah. And I forget what they showed Vallée, and they came away with claiming there was some type of devil's deal or something like that. To me, it smacked of a perception management thing. Let's invite these big voices out who the UFO community will listen to, and let's show them a landing and get them to promote our spin.
That sounds about right. I mean, if you were the military, you would, why wouldn't you show people fake UFO footage? I mean, they've been known to do that with documentation. They show a bunch of fake documents and throw at people and let them run with it. I mean, that exact same thing happened to Linda Moulton Howe that Richard Doty was involved with, and he got her on a bunch of things. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that maybe they filmed some, because Lookout Mountain had several film studios up there. There were several recording studios. All the footage that is in our documentary is all real footage from Lookout Mountain. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility that who knows what they were actually filming up there. I mean, the common thing is that it was a lot of military videos, which I'm not doubting. I'm sure that they also did a lot of military training videos as well.
Sure.
But
that's why there's so many too, is that they were taking care of all that stuff as well. Now it might be, here's the thing. It might be because when you see the building was what we call the Avis building, it was pretty big. I mean, it's a big square concrete exterior, high rise, not like real high, but I would say equivalent of, if I had to guess, because I'm not looking at it right now, like a 4-story, maybe 5-story building, which it would be large enough to house some studio space. It could be that Avis replaced Lookout Mountain once Lookout Mountain was closed. Now remember,
something interesting to look into. Yeah.
Remember, Mark McCandlish, rest his soul, a good guy. In the whole thing about his source for the ARV, the Alien Reproduction Vehicle, at one point, one of the witness said that he was invited to look at it in a hangar at Norton. And then also in the Roswell ET lore, they claim that the Roswell craft for a time was housed here at Norton. So Norton has a history with UFO stuff, legendary UFO stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me that that's why those folks were brought out here to watch it.
Yeah, according to lore, that freaking Roswell craft got around, bro. That one got the right path. That one got and supposedly is at Bigelow Aerospace now. I don't know. I can't keep track of it all.
Yeah,
it just keeps going all over the place.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out. There may be a clue. Norton was a military airlift command base, so we had a lot of 141s, transport aircraft. When it closed down, and then San Bernardino County bought it and turned it into this airport, for many years, it was just an aircraft maintenance airport. Now they have a terminal with this little airline called Skyway or something, and there's only 2 flights, and they are going to try to actually make it a working airport. But for the longest time, it was a maintenance airport. So maybe that's a clue as to why the craft might have been brought here. But I will tell you something else that a lot of people don't know about Norton. Right here in this part of the San Bernardino Valley, we have this weird advantage. It happens right here where I live all the time. Redlands, the mountains, San Bernardino right next door, up in Yucaipa, all around us can have thundering rainstorm, and we get nothing. It's this weird anomalous pocket of clear weather. This, for years, I don't know if it is still anymore, but for years, this was one of the spots that Air Force One would come to if there was bad weather at all the other airports in Southern California, when it was an Air Force base and after it became the airport. So maybe this weird anomalous, area that we're in here that causes that might have something to do with why they would bring, something like that here, if you believe it was an extraterrestrial craft, which I don't.
I don't either. I don't think any of it's extraterrestrial craft, but we're going to get more into that here in a little bit. Now, you mentioned in the documentary about your father being in the Air Force, and I know you've written extensively about your father and what he went through in your books. But maybe a little bit more on what it is what exactly, from your understanding, that he was involved with, and kind of what makes you believe that he had some sort of MK Ultra mind control done to him before or after his service.
Yeah, he was in the right place at the right time. He was in the right command during the time that the Air Force had first established its own MK Ultra program. He was in the Aerospace Medical Division of the U.S. Air Force, and that was it sounds like, ho-hum, they run the hospitals, right? Okay, it's all medical treatment stuff. Well, here's the thing. The Aerospace Medical Division of any military air force, be it ours or the guys who we brought over in Operation Paperclip, the Luftwaffe, the Aerospace Medicine Division of any air force or military is where you find the beginnings of any manned space program pursued by that nation. And that is exactly what the U.S. Air Force was doing in the 1950s with their Aerospace Medical Division. And my dad, he was what you call a physiological training specialist. One of his duties was to run pilots through the altitude chamber to get them used to hypoxia and high altitudes and being able to work their life support systems at high altitudes, test that stuff on the ground, right? You don't wait to put them up in an airplane, and altitude chambers can be deadly. You can die horribly in those things. He told me about some of the gruesome suicides that had happened in using those. Now, here's the thing. My dad went in 1955, and it was in the early 50s that the CIA brought in the military branches and taught them about MK Ultra. And the Air Force, matter of record, was the most keenly interested, the most turned on by this, and the historical record. I'm referring to the testimony given in the church committee in the 70s. The historical record says the Air Force was the one branch that went off and started its own independent MK Ultra program within the Air Force, within the psychiatric section of aerospace medicine division. And by the time my dad came in, they would have been doing this for a couple of years. Now, my dad worked in Air Force space program related things. A lot of people don't know that the Mercury space program, the program which was made famous by the movie and the book and the movie, The Right Stuff, right? The one with the black capsule and the silver spacesuits and, the one astronaut per craft in the early 60s, this is depicted. Well, this was started by the U.S. Air Force. They were working on this as early as 1956, 57. The capsule had been designed. The suits, the silver suits, had been designed. My dad's unit at George Air Force Base was part of the ground testing of the Mercury astronaut suits. Okay. And so he had a pretty high clearance to work with that stuff because naturally this was during, this was the first, the Cold War was only 10 years old at this time. And so he had to have a pretty high clearance to be able to work with the space program stuff. So by virtue of that, my dad was working with some pretty classified secret stuff. Okay. Now, from my perspective as a former OSI agent, an Air Force officer, it looks to me like because of the Cold War intensity, right? They were looking likely for a way to protect secrets. They were likely looking for a way to prepare their personnel to not give away secrets inadvertently, or maybe even keep the secrets suppressed under torture, right? Under duress. So that's what I'm thinking that they were interested in primarily, because we know that MK Ultra was developed a great deal to help pilots that if they were shot down, bomber pilots, if they were shot down over China.
To resist interrogation.
Yeah, to resist interrogation. So why not train your personnel, even who work on classified things here? You use the psychic driving, you use the false narrative. So in my book, Shimmering Light, as you know, I go into the possibility that he did his secret work, okay, and something happened when it was time for him to leave the project and leave the Air Force. They laid a false narrative over what he was really doing. And it could be that this false narrative was the story that he told, most of the elements, the wilder elements of the story he told for decades, and actually what that was that false narrative, the more fantastic version, so that, right, if he talked about it, few people would believe him. And, over the years, and I was told this when I was in the Air Force, I was told this by a superior officer, that they had used, the way he described it, he says they used hypnosis on your dad to suppress what he knew and what happened to him. And, it is why he got out of the Air Force, because something he was involved with, something went wrong, and he ended up being released early. Honorable discharge. I have his records. His records say excellent character, excellent efficiency, top notch. He was a staff sergeant. Air Force had no problem with him, but something happened, and he was released early. And my mom told me that for several months right after he was released, he would be just suddenly terrified and just be screaming in terror in his sleep. And she'd wake him up and he'd sit up and go, what's wrong? Like he wasn't aware of anything.
Yeah, it would make sense that the Air Force would be doing that for a multitude of reasons, just like a lot of the other, MK Ultra programs. The military was also involved with. Some of the most early ones was the Army. The MK Ultra program. Well, it's kind of tricky because it's not necessarily like they weren't mind controlled programs per se. They were more like substance experiments that were being run on the Army. They were using like a multitude of drugs, and then they would have like these Army personnel just like sign up as like volunteers, and then all that they were told was, hey, we're gonna be experimenting with some substances with you. They don't tell you what they are, and you go in and you inhale this substance. Sometimes it's one of those, like it's like a dropper that they drop on your skin. It's got a different name from it. It's like B223 or something like that, but it's a different kind of hallucinogenic substance. But the one that they tested on the most was a drug called BZ, which is like 100 more times powerful than LSD, that would just put people out of their mind for weeks at a time. Now, did your father ever mention to you anything about UFOs or extraterrestrials? And do you think that you just mentioned that they were trying to kind of maybe put a screened type of, well, people will call them screen memories, but they're also false memory in there implanted on him to cover up the real thing? And do you think that that is the information about the UFOs and the aliens?
I think that what is possibly the false narrative is, here's what he said. Here's the interesting thing. He said that when basically he was at advanced training, okay, at Gunner Air Force Base in the summer of 1958. Okay. At that time, remember, the Mercury space program was in the hands of the Air Force. It was an Air Force program. NASA was not stood up until October of that year, 1958. And then Mercury, I like to say public Mercury, was handed over to NASA. Doesn't mean the Air Force ever really stopped. But so there he is at Gunner Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama, at this advanced training. And then one day he and two other guys are ordered to report on to this plane, and they're going to be going to Texas, where Randolph and Kelly and other intel and training stuff is. And somewhere over Mississippi or Louisiana, around there, the plane, he said the plane takes a northern bank. It turns, starts heading north. And from the front cabin, the forward cabin, this officer comes out, a guy named, he said his name was Milton Knight, a major. And Major Knight informed them that they were not going to Texas. They were going to Ohio, to Wright-Patterson. And he says that when they got there, they were all checked in and everything. And now remember, he started telling me this in 1974, this part of it, where they were taken to Wright-Pat and they were shown the remains of occupants of a craft that had crashed in New Mexico in the late 40s. Okay, he's telling me this in 1974, me and my sisters. And, all through the years, as Roswell became well known, and immediately ET was slapped over it, because back then, remember, Colonel Hott, said, oh, it was a flying saucer from another world, and all that controversy. He said, and he insisted for years, he goes, these people, these, remains he saw in this craft, he goes, they were not aliens from outer space. They share this planet with us. Okay. But he insisted, he goes, they're not ETs, and they're not little grays. They were not these little grays. He used to laugh at that and get aggravated about it every time that was shoved down our throat. Okay. Over the decades, he'd say, this is ridiculous. It wasn't that. He said they looked as human as you and I, only they had little to no body hair. And they were just a little smaller than our stature, but not these little 3-foot tall grays. And it just was something he said, that's not it. That's not who they were or what they were. But I think that where the story about where they came from and the fact that they were here could have been could have been the false narrative. I don't know for sure, because I was told by the person who told me when I was on active duty that the hypnosis, the MK Ultra, so to speak, had been done to him. I was told that, look, it's breaking down. It's been breaking down over the years. It explained my dad. They used to say manic depressive. We say bipolar. They said, your dad kind of is bipolar. And like, yeah, my dad's a kind of a moody guy. And he said that was exacerbated by what they did to him with this hypnosis, because they keyed it to the phases of the moon. On the full moon, what they did would reset to keep it suppressed. It was like a self. And if you go look at the history of MK Ultra, they were always looking for that. They talk about they were always looking for a way to make it kind of reset itself automatically. Well, according to what I was told, they did it to the full moon. So every month of my dad's life, after he got out of the Air Force, there's the full moon, and it would reactivate. But I was told that it would weaken over the years, over the decades, and that was what was happening. So you have to consider, okay, was what he was telling me about the people who live in the underground and crash this thing that they were flying, is that the false narrative, or is that the truth they were suppressing? See, that's what I don't know for sure. But I have to consider that was the false narrative, because, he was, maybe working on something that was Cold War sensitive and highly classified, and they didn't want that getting out. So better that they tell this wild story about people in the underground. Same like, the same reason like when Colonel Hout says, oh, it's a flying saucer from another world in 1947. That could have been a false narrative, folks.
And how would they even know? That's like the thing. Like, if you're involved in like a classified project, everything's compartmentalized. Like, you're not going to know if you're not directly involved in that top secret project.
Yeah,
you don't know.
Exactly. So it's a weird thing. I've always found I've always found it very interesting, because here I am, I get into the Air Force, I have a pretty good clearance because of what I did, and I'm told by a superior officer who I was close to this stuff about my dad, and it fits, it matches. And when I get his medical record finally years later, it fits and it matches. So what is the truth? I'm still trying to find the confirmation on that, because there, as I say in my book, there is reason to accept, I don't like to use the word believe, accept the possibility that we do share this planet with another civilization. There is a possibility of that. That's been in every culture's mythology and lore. And think about it, where do we get a lot of mythology and lore? There's a nugget of truth to a lot of that stuff. Something that's true over the ages gets retold to where then eventually, oh, that's our mythology, that's our lore. Well, maybe it was true, and it with time it has become mythology and lore because we don't have personal confirmation of it. So I have to, as a trained and experienced criminal investigator and intel collector, I have to acknowledge that the wilder parts of my dad's story could have been a false narrative, because he, again, right place, right time, right branch, right command, right era to have been MK Ultra. And I could totally see the Air Force. This was a shiny new toy. Hey guys, you want to be part of something special, serve your country. It's so classified that when you're done, we're going to suppress it. You don't have to ever worry about spilling the beans because you won't remember it. We're going to put something else in there. And I guarantee you that Air Force personnel, military personnel was like, yeah, count me in. I want to be part of the team. I want to do this. There was probably a great level of innocence to it,
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to find I know I wrote the name of this drug down, but this drug that they were testing these army people on in some of the earliest projects, there was a drug that did that they would take, and it would erase their memory. they wouldn't be able to remember what had happened to them. And this one gentleman was on a documentary on HBO. I can't remember the name of the documentary because I watched it really late, but he was talking about how he got his Army records back, and he realized that they were doing all of this testing with drugs on him. And there was one that he 100% absolutely did not remember. And then he looked up what the drug was used for and how it was used. And it's like a memory suppressing drug. Like and he put two and two together that because there was a bar that was right outside of this Army base where they would have these experiments done. And a lot of the people would go to the bar afterwards. And he was like, hey, they probably spiked our drinks with this drug and did whatever it is that they do, because I don't remember it. I don't remember this project. I don't remember this program. But here are my records, and it's saying that I was involved in this project, but I do not remember it. And that gets into our hypothesis within The Shining too. And maybe it's a high possibility that Jack Torrance within The Shining was drugged by Lloyd the bartender, because he doesn't experience anything strange until after he takes that first drink of alcohol provided to him by Lloyd. And then we have the exact same real life experience happening with Frank Olson. That same thing happened with Sidney Gottlieb, spiked his drink. And then you mentioned also in a documentary of an LSD aerosol that's just been sprayed in the air upon unknown suspects. It's wild.
Yeah, and think about that. I think that was in the earlier mid 60s, or maybe during the even the into the late 60s. And think of the context of the whole hippie scene, and think of what Dave McGowan writes in Weird Scenes in the Canyon about Laurel Canyon. There they were doing those kinds of things in that apartment in San Francisco. You have to wonder, if you're new to this, you have to wonder, what else were they doing in San Francisco? What were they doing in LA? What were they doing, to us within this whole hippie movement? Of course, there was the legitimate, part of it, but that subculture is one of those ones that would be easy to embed agents in, very easy, and we know the Army got in trouble for embedding agents, domestically in the U.S. without, when you're in the military. When I was an agent for the Air Force, anything I did domestically, it either had to be on base, or I did most stuff off base because I was counterintelligence guy, and I was always working with the FBI. But you're a military agent, you do stuff off that base. You got to be coordinating with the local police or the FBI, the feds, because you're a military agent, and there's all the posse comitatus laws that are, after the Civil War and Reconstruction. We wanted to make sure there was a division between what the military did in our civilian world, in our civilian cities. So, we know the Army broke that rule and got in trouble for it in the 60s and 70s. So, what was the CIA doing?
That's exactly right. And I think it's a big shocker too. It was a big shocker for me, even while I was making the documentary, that, the music industry of the 60s and how all these people are tied to high ranking military, like their family are in high ranking military positions. Their fathers are mostly in high ranking military positions. And it's like a check on your mind, because you're like, wow, this is the reason why these people, you can be the greatest singer in the world, you can be the greatest musician in the world, and it really doesn't matter, because you're not a part of this group, you're not a part of this family, you don't have the people behind you that's going to propel you forward. And you can be the greatest guitar player ever, and it's not going to matter if your dad's a freaking plumber, or a carpenter.
Yeah, that has happened. Certainly that has happened. How many talented people have we never heard of, because of this kind of thing? I mean, it's nefarious enough, just, how the entertainment industry has its own gatekeepers, without this extra weird element of Uncle Sam and the intel community being involved in that, again, how if you're someone who cares about the arts, How have the arts been hurt because of who's been suppressed, because they just aren't useful to an agenda.
Man, I wish I could find the name of this. I know that I wrote it in my notes in my phone, but I cannot find it because I knew that it was going to be important for some time in the future. Oh, it's EA233 is the name of the drug. EA233. Okay, let's look this bad boy up. EA2233. Boom. Okay. It's a synthetic cannabinoid, an analog of THC. It was invented in 1949 during attempts to educate structure of THC. One of the active components of cannabis, the DMPH, is a pale yellow various oil, which is isolable in water and dissolves in alcohol, and is normally applied to the skin. Yeah, that would be the drug, the memory loss drug. I'd have to read more about how, if it actually does. But Edgewood Arsenal was where these army experiments first happened, and that was established in 1948. So that was really quickly after the war. That's where all the army personnel, and then they would do like open air testing of BZ, where they would do like a simulation of a battle, and then they would just have BZ in barrels just like flooding out and like hitting the wind, and it was hitting all these soldiers, and then they were going out of their minds, and then they would grab them off of the simulated battlefield and take them into this facility and ask them all these questions and like study them, and it's wild, dude.
Yeah it and when you realize how long they were playing with this stuff, think about it. We got MK Ultra from the Germans through Operation Paperclip, essentially. Now our specialists, our scientists who did it, they were aware of the work that German and I think Swiss scientists were doing along these lines. They were aware that this kind of research was going on, but we really got our hands on it through Operation Paperclip. There's a lot of people who think Operation Paperclip was all about getting the guys to design the bomb. No. Operation Paperclip wasn't even an American idea. It was pitched to Colonel Harry Armstrong by an aerospace medicine scientist of the Luftwaffe in the last year of the war. He gave him the idea, said, hey, Colonel, he knew him as Harry because these guys were all specialists in this stuff, and they'd known each other since the 1920s. And they were all obsessed with putting man in space. That's what it was really all about. This aerospace, I think it was, might have been Strug or one of them, obviously, said, hey, I can get you a whole bunch of our guys, and we'll happily work for the United States. Just bring us into the U.S. I see Operation Paperclip as a complete Trojan horse. Okay, that was the silent invasion of the real core, hardcore movement that was behind the rise of Nazi Germany. And this is what they do. They've done this since medieval era with the Prussian Junkers class. They would do this. They would attach themselves and ingratiate to a host. They would use that host, and then they would start soliciting a relationship with that host enemy, and then they would ingratiate themselves with that host enemy and then destroy the host. I think that's what they're doing in the United States. We're the host. They got into us through Operation Paperclip because they seduced us with, hey, all us aerospace medicine guys from the Luftwaffe, we know how to put man in space. Okay. So, of course, the United States said, yeah, let's get these guys in here because they're going to be great for the, what the Air Force, the Army Air Corps, and, to help end the war and after the war for what's going to go on. The whole thing about keeping air crews alive in the high altitude bombers, that's exactly what they were initially part of, but that was a side product. That was just a result on the way to putting man in space. From the 1920s, all these same group of guys who knew each other on opposite sides of the war, but they knew each other before the war, they were always dedicated to putting man in space. That was their obsession. And so after the war, they continued that obsession, and the idea of the life support systems in high altitude bombers and recon aircraft, that was just a step along the way of them wanting to put man in space, which is what I argue Roswell actually was the first American attempt to put man in space. And because it was the Cold War, oh boy, that was the biggest secret. So the whole thing about it being ET, folks, right now there's going to be people in the live chat, people in your audience. I hate that Bosley guy. He doesn't believe in our beloved gospel of the ET. Oh no, he's one of those. But here's the thing, they point to, there's so many witnesses to Roswell. Well, they choose to ignore Carl Flock's work because, he used to work for the CIA. And Carl Flock is just one of the people who went out and investigated and found out that some of these so-called witnesses could not possibly have witnessed what they claim. Some of them don't even exist, like the nurse, one of the one nurse that they talk about, and one of them admitted to lying. The whole myth of Roswell being an ET thing is just that. It's a myth. And I say it was a myth propagated by the Department of Defense wanting to keep that narrative with Roswell because they did not want what it really was to come out. And you just now, the whole ET hypothesis has become nothing more, mostly a religion. The gospel of, the catechism of disclosure, and this, that, and the other. And these people are falling for it, hook, line, and sinker. They think Lou Elizondo is a legitimate source. They think Bob Lazar. I mean, Bob Lazar, come on.
Rogan will prop up Bob Lazar all day long, dude. But before we get on to that, I think I've mentioned to you this before because we were talking about Project Paperclip, but this is the Russian version of Project Paperclip, which is Operation Volskalaheim. I don't think that's the right pronunciation. I'm not Russian, so forgive me. So Operation Volskalaheim was a Soviet operation under which more than 25 former Nazi German scientists, engineers, and technicians worked for several areas for companies and institutions relevant to military and economic policy in the Soviet occupation zone of Germany and Berlin, as well as around 4,000 more family members. Totally more than 6,000 people were transported from former Nazi Germany as war reparations to the Soviet Union. I don't think enough people bring that into play as well, because on the books, Russia got more on the books now. People have estimated that the United States got as many as like 20,000, right? But officially on the books, it's like 1,600 or 1,500 that the United States got. But then Russia turned around and got 6,000 of them. And I think that they got them before the United States got them. So it could have also been something along the lines of, also too, with it being a more of a German idea to infiltrate into the United States, it also could have been, look at the Russians. They're just rounding up all these people. They're transporting them on train right into the Soviet Union. We gotta do that too, or we're going to be behind, because we've always had this weird thing with Russia, especially during the Cold War. We can't let them get any of our technology. We got to be ahead of them in the space race. We got to open up remote viewing programs, because we've heard through intelligence data collection that they have a remote viewing program. So we got to train our psychics even more. Yeah. So it's always been this back and forth between the United States and Russia. I don't know. That's just a thought. It's not anything confirmed, but
here's what could adjust how we think about that. I always make a point, and I know you're aware of this. I always make a point that when we're talking about Cold War, I refer to the Soviet Union, not Russia, because Russia, as we know, exists again today as such. And the Russia today, and in the Russia since the fall of the wall, is not the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, they were an enemy, not maybe exactly how it was spun, but we needed to be concerned about them to an extent. And on the flip side, from their perspective, they could say the same thing about us. We were the two big rival powers, right? So naturally, and we had a fundamental difference in political and economic and social philosophy, right? So I can understand why there was the concern. I can understand why, if we got some Nazi scientists, they wanted to get some too. But consider this, that the ones that a certain core, at least, of the ones who went to Russia or the Soviet Union, they were attempting to do the same thing to them that they were doing to us, and that was ingratiate themselves, work inside, chew, get influence over industry, get influence over politicians and so forth, and influence the society to support what it is you wanted to achieve. In our case, and I think to a degree in the Soviet Union, it was number one, a space program. These guys were obsessed with getting a space program. Now, in the United States and Russia, we were the two big space program rivals. Speaking for our part of the world, in the United States, we were we're more then than now, capitalist, right? So it was military industrial complex. We have the military industrial complex that we know of and speak of because of these Operation Paperclip guys. That's an idea that went back centuries, okay, to use industry to ingratiate yourself with the host that you're parasiting onto. And that's exactly what they did. And they helped create our military industrial complex in order to create the means to build us a space program, which really they saw as they were developing this for themselves, for their own use. Of course, it has American flags on it and says United States, but they're really getting done what they want to get done, piggybacking on, what they helped us create. So I think they were using the Soviets too in that regard. It was to get us into space. Joseph Farrell has some very interesting things to talk about that, to say about that regarding industry and space, because we don't know what's going on out there. We don't know what kind of mining is either actually happening or being identified for subsequent exploitation. And they do the long plan. Okay, they do the long plan. To them, decades or even a century out, and they're willing to go slow enough to make it look like something that they could easily deny. What do you mean, Walter? That's crazy, you people who think that. Meanwhile, you look closely and you watch this very thing happening.
Yeah, plausible deniability is is the name of the game with a lot of these people. But speaking of Dr. Farrell, you have a online conference coming up here really soon?
Yes, we do. The Transtemporal Cosmic Mysteries webinar conference. Tickets are available now at walterbosley.com. It's going to be a really cool event where Joseph Farrell, Joshua Cutchin, myself, Malia Grimm, and we're working on a couple of others, one that we're calling the mystery guest. And this is going to be a one-day online streamed event. You can watch it from the comfort of your own home, of course, as we've been doing for years now. And I'm going to be doing my presentation live from Disneyland. The whole event's live, but I'm going to be in Disneyland giving my presentation, talking about the experience I had there in 1981. What do I mean by transtemporal cosmic? Well, that's, through time, right? Transtemporal, across time, and cosmic, space. Joseph Farrell and I had done a series of episodes on my YouTube channel, the Walter Bosley channel, that are the most popular episodes on my channel. And we have revisited this, and we're taking it a step further, and that's the theme of this event. We're going to be, he has written about what he calls the cosmic war, this long ago, pre-ancient conflict, literally between civilizations on different planets in our system. This is it's a basic idea that's not original with him. He's the first to tell you, but he's really fleshed it out in a fascinating way. And there are aspects of time phenomena. And I've written, of course, about weird experiences and strange phenomena related to time and in space. So we've brought together, I think, a really good little collection of speakers, and it's on Saturday, March 8th, 2025, Saturday, March 8th. And tickets are available at walterbosley.com right now.
Yes, I just dropped the link in the chat for everyone to check that out. And also,
if you use, there are discount codes. If you use Cosmic Walter, you get 10% off.
I think I also have a discount code of Cosmic Ryder as well. So if you want to use that too, you can get tickets to that. And what date is that again for the audience?
The 8th of March, 2025. And please, by all means, use Cosmic Ryder as your code. Sometimes I get robotic to make sure I get all the details out. So Cosmic Ryder, RYD.
What time does that start?
We're probably going to be starting at I think 9 a.m. Pacific time.
Cool. Awesome. I'll drop the link in here one more time for you guys, and we'll also get a shout out at the end of the show as well. What do you, man, I've really stepped away from the UFO topic and the UFO phenomenon for a while now, especially since I've been working on this documentary. I was like, this is just a super toxic community, and it's like, it's like a religion, and it's really like a cult, and I haven't done any shows on it recently. And I was just, did you watch the new documentary on Netflix with, what's his name? Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp. It's like a 5-episode new documentary that led into this new UFO hearing that just happened a couple of days ago.
I long ago have seen enough of Jeremy Corbell. I don't ever care. I am not, to me, he's a carnival barker. He's a self-promoter, and when he's no longer making the money he's making or getting the attention he wants out of this community, he's going to jump to something else. No, to me, I'm sorry, I lost interest in anything Corbell says a long time ago, and George Knapp disappoints the heck out of me, hitching his wagon to that. So no, and like you said, the UFO community discourse has been ruined by the current UFO culture, the popular UFO community culture. Talk about Dunning-Kruger, talk about blind cocksurety. You tell them something.
That's a good word. I've never heard that word before. But
cocksurety. It's if you don't know, act like you do, because that's what the alpha males do. I mean, Jesus, come on. The only guys who want to consciously display cocksurety and alphaism are the ones who they know they've never really had their manhood tested to themselves, so they're not as confident with themselves. And that's a jab, but it's an authentic one. Here's the thing. You have a bunch of true believerism. It is no different than a fundamentalist religion. They have their gospels, they have their prophets, and they just choose to believe. And you know what? I think what planted some of that seed in there, the seed that planted some of that in there, was that damn poster in X-Files hanging on Mulder's wall. I want to believe. Yeah. And here's the irony. By the end of that series, even Mulder has explained that it's ironic. He wants to believe, but he's not convinced. And in that last season they did. He even said that. And you cannot say anything against their beloved ET hypothesis that you don't get ratioed or venom spewed on you, really by mostly the biggest, most ignorant crowd. And I mentioned Dunning-Kruger. That's the people who, the way it's used popularly is, the more someone is convinced they're right, they're wrong to the equal extent. I think I've got that explained right. They're so convinced that they're right And that's where the cocksurety comes from. And yet you can't show them how ignorant they are of something, because it's all about, if you don't know, act like you do, which, I come from, kind of an operational background. And let me tell you something, that you don't know something, act like you do, will get you killed or worse. It's bad enough to get yourself killed in the world that I worked in. The most unforgivable thing is to get someone else hurt or killed because you acted like you knew. In the world where it counts, you admit, hey, I don't know. Hey, this guy's the expert, I'm not. Okay. But it's only in this fluffy civilian world, mostly in America, where we got all this cocksurety walking around and, trying to reason with those people regarding the whole ET hypothesis. Now, all that said, I've said this a million times. I totally think ETs exist. Numerous. I think it's foolish to think or assume that there's no other intelligent life in this vast universe. That is ridiculous and equally ignorant to think that. I do think ETs have come here and continue to come here. All I've ever tried to argue was that the vast majority of legitimate UFO reports, not those where people just want to be part of the fun, so they make it up, or where they confuse, a biplane for a UFO, you know what I mean? The legitimate, truly unidentified things. I'm just saying that about 90% of them are classified human technology. Whether they like to hear that or not, that's probably what it is. Now, what does that mean? That means
the Pentagon just confirmed that UAP report from Arrow basically said that all of it is it's either misidentified or it's our technology. That's what the report said.
Or what I did like was they kind of hinted that there is a source of this human technology that we don't know what the source is. Ooh, that opens up the independent or breakaway discussion. But here's the thing, like in my number, when I say 90% is our technology, I leave a margin of 10% into which ET could be a part of. Now, a few years back, I gave a talk. At that time, the stat, according to MUFON, checkered as they are, still they gave a stat that there were 5,000, UFO reports in each month in any given year, right? Okay, take 5,000 of those, take my 10% number. That leaves 500 UFO sightings that any one of them could be legitimate ET. Well, folks, it only takes one, right? It only takes one approvable ET craft. There we go. We've got the proof. So I am a believer in the existence of ET and that they do come here. What I hate to see is all these people, hook, line, and sinker, every story that the military players are paraded out to tell us, just be careful with that, because they do have a threat narrative that, is needed. See, the threat narrative is something that is necessary for a military industrial complex to exist. During the Cold War, we had the Cold War, right? And then during the terrorist era, we had the terrorists. Remember what von Braun, the alleged deathbed confession, whether that really happened that way or not, think how accurate that is. There was this, there was that. There's always got to be a threat. So now, I'm kind of in the camp that thinks that they're using the whole ET thing as that threat narrative. And this is why the Lou Elizondos and the Commander Fravor and the Tic Tac and all these guys are being paraded out, because you have these people that worship veterans, non-veterans who, anything a veteran says. Folks, I was a federal agent in the military, okay? The reason I don't suck up and kiss butt to everybody who's a veteran is because part of my job was finding out and knowing that, unfortunately, there are unscrupulous people, criminals even, who have been in the military.
Imagine that, Walter.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, but just veteran status in itself doesn't automatically earn my awe and respect. I still say, okay, great, but just because somebody was a veteran doesn't mean that they're telling the truth. It doesn't mean that they're still not part of an intelligence agenda. One of the dumbest things that I heard Fravor say, and you know what? I promise you, if I was having a beer with him privately and I said, "Come on, Commander, you know better than that comment you made about, if it was ours, I'd know about it." I'm telling you right now.
That's what they all say. They all say that
BS.
that's the first thing that they come out and say at every single hearing. That's any military person that is said to have seen any of these craft. The first thing they say is, "Oh, well, I know it's not ours. We don't have that type of technology." It goes back to the exact same thing we were talking about with Roswell. It's the same thing. Those people, they would not have known because that's a top secret classified program.
Thank you. A squadron commander is not going to be briefed in on every secret thing that's being developed. I know that for a fact, okay, because I worked, with programs, protecting programs, was, briefed in. I'm telling you, not every fighter pilot is briefed in on the latest thing. So, and he knows that. I think that Commander Fravor, is still doing his duty. He was recruited to be part of whatever this agenda is. And, he's saluting sharply and being a good naval aviator. But there was a question on the screen about aliens coming out of ETs coming out of the ocean. I think here's the thing. When you want to convince somebody of a spin, you're going to put some truth in it. Okay. ETs coming out of the ocean, as Lou Elizondo, referred to, that idea is not original with him. That's not some big revelation that the great Lou brought to us. That idea has been around a long time. People have suspected that for a very long time. And I think it's a very reasonable thing. I mean, 71% of the planet, right, is ocean, covered by ocean. So if you were an extraterrestrial race, you had the technology, come and go here, go out in the middle of the South Pacific, right? And just no one's going to see you go in there. You don't even have to go that far. So yes, to answer that question, I think if you are talking about an other's presence on this planet, doesn't have to be ET, but it would be logical if they did. I think, I think you'll find their activity under the water.
It's circle reporting. They're just regurgitating what they've heard other people talk about over and over and over again, and then they put their own new little spin on it. And it's so interesting, Walter, because I watched a majority of it because I didn't have anything going on that day whenever the new hearing was going on. I was like, all right, whatever. I'll just kind of put it on in the background and kind of listen, full well knowing that there wasn't going to be any new revelations that come out of it. And it's the exact same thing as the first one with Dave Grush that we actually did an entire show on, me and you. We commented on the entire thing like a year ago, the entire congressional hearing. It's not even worth it to do it this time. It's just like
how many congressmen were actually there? Was it 2?
Like half the amount that was there the first time.
Oh, and the usual
they were literally bouncing back between each other so frequently because there wasn't enough people there to ask any questions.
Yeah, exactly. It was a laugh. But here's the thing: I've encountered people getting impatient with me and indignant with me because I pointed that out, and they're like, "No, this was amazing." I mean, I think even Dolan, of course, he paints it all up to be bigger than it is. And the others, I think we got it. I think we got disclosure. I'm just really, you're just going to keep pounding away at that scripture, believe.
At this point, Walter, they need to wheel out an actual UFO or an alien body or something to convince me of any of this, because you would think that after 77 years that there would be more proof and more evidence of extraterrestrials, but there isn't, and there hasn't been, and there's probably not going to be.
Well, if there is, and this is what I really enjoy, when the day comes. First of all, I think the ETs themselves control their own disclosure. Okay. Our government couldn't stop disclosure if the ETs decide they want to be disclosed. What I love about it is, folks, nobody in the ufology community okay, is going to be the one selected to reveal, to disclose. I'm sorry, this community is a niche community. It's a little blip in the bigger, world. Okay, if an extraterrestrial civilization wants to disclose itself, they're just going to appear in our skies, and they're not going to care what the U.S. government or the DoD says about it. They're going to say, hey, we're here. Tell your people to deal with it. Knock it off. There's welcome to the universe. There's a whole bunch of us out here. Grow up. Whatever little mind control games you political people are playing on your little planet, sorry, party's over. You're not using us anymore. Now, here's the other thing, and it's a little bit ironic. For some people have to realize, I know there's a concern, I mentioned it, about the threat narrative being used to keep our military industrial complex, supported and going and thriving and booming. And I know that a threat narrative can be used to control a population. Folks, that does not mean that we are not ever going to encounter a malevolent ET visitor. Okay, I think we have in the past. In some cases, they set themselves up as gods. Yahweh. But here's the thing. It's inevitable. We are going to encounter an ET civilization that is hell-bent on our subjugation or even our destruction. It's going to happen eventually. I think it's happened before. So the thing is, yes, be careful of the threat narrative being spun by certain players now, but do not for a moment think that everybody in the universe out there from other worlds are benevolent space angel brothers who just want cotton candy and roses for us. That's childish. That's very childish.
Yeah, it's so unbelievable. And the amount of UFO documentaries, and they're still coming out and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, it's not any different. It's the same thing over and over again. You just get people up there talking about these stories, like, and nothing ever gets solved. It's like a giant waste of time. And I don't understand why people are still into it at this point. I mean, there's so many other topics and so many other things that people can talk about that is far more interesting than something that has zero proof and zero evidence.
Well, here's something that you hear a phrase all the time, but I haven't heard it applied to ufology or the UFO community. I think more and more people are being red-pilled about the UFO community and about the whole ET hypothesis. And we need to red-pill people about it. Because it's an embarrassment of itself. It's like there are a bunch of religious zealots that if you say one thing against the gospel of the ET hypothesis, you're put upon, you're ratioed, you're treated as a heretic. And I mean, these people are nuts and they're ignorant as all hell. The ones who do what I'm talking about, they're just ignorant. And for them, it is a religion, and you know how it is with religion. There's no fighting that when that grips the human psyche.
Yeah, it's like they're mind controlled and I think that it's just like an online problem. It's an online issue, just like so many other things are like an online problem. Like when you talk to people, when you talk to people in person, like out on the street or at the gym or wherever you are, like they are not like they are online. I mean, there are some instances that people can get a little crazy. I had a little instance the other day at the gym with a lady that was just, well, not a lady, but a gentleman that was just like highly religious and like just came at me with like all this religion stuff. And I was like, oh my God, this is not the time or the place. I'm sitting in a sauna right now, bro. Like I'm trying to enjoy. I just got done working out. Dude. Like I want to relax in here. And he's like, do you believe in Jesus Christ? Do you go to church? You need to be going to church. And I'm like, bro, like, what do you? So I kind of had it out with this guy for a minute because I'm not going to back down from some kind of nonsense like that. I'm not going to listen to it. So there are some people that are like that, but for the most part, people are not the way that they are online in real life,
because they don't have the anonymity when you're looking them in the face.
That's right.
They don't have that anonymity. And you know, the UFO zealots, like religious zealots, and the priesthood of religion, the priesthood of ufology, you know, the priesthoods of religion, they're like used car salesmen. Of course, they're going to tell you, hey, come to our lot. Our cars are the best cars. The other ones, they're no good. You need to buy our cars. It's the same thing with religions, the priesthoods, ministries, or whatever. The ministers, they're the used car salesmen of their particular religion. You know, oh, it's ours. All the other ones are bad. Well, says who? Well, says our priesthood. But there's, of course, you're going to say that. What about an objective source? Can we have an objective source on this? No, you're not allowed to have that, because once you bring that in, their whole charade falls apart. And this is why people like you, people like myself, people who try to be rational in the UFO world, we're pushed aside like heretics, because the Jeremy Corbells, the Knaps, the you know, all the other goofballs who have the spotlight, their narcissistic fervor, they don't want to let that spotlight go. You know, and if you say anything against the credibility of the crap that they're leading people astray with, you're going to get ratioed. I went to the Bob Lazar movie that Corbell had done a few years back.
The Netflix one, the Netflix documentary one?
Yeah, I went to the screening of that, the LA theatrical premiere of that, thanks to a couple of good friends, Stephen Bradford, and that's where I met my friend David Paff there, and we were in the audience, and Greg Bishop was there, if you know him. We were in the side areas. The whole middle of the theater was packed with Corbell clones. Okay, a bunch of, you know, the bro douches that Corbell could have come out and farted on stage, and they'd stand up and go, yeah, all right, dude, all right, Jeremy, yeah, you know, and aw shucks Lazar comes out, you know, the guy who really doesn't want to tell his story, doesn't want to be a star, but he comes out just sucking in all the cheering, and come on, it was just,
yeah, that whole thing was a put up job. They made it seem like that his company got raided because of the element 115 or whatever, when that wasn't the case. It was because he was selling the things that could be used to make bombs.
Well, no,
FBI raided.
No, actually, there had been a murder case in which the suspect had used something that he bought from Lazar, that Lazar sold for other purposes, legitimate purposes.
Right.
And this was my understanding. And they were investigating the use of this, whatever it was, in that murder, and Lazar and Corbell and Knapp spin it up into, you know, it's almost like, hey, how can we use this for our narrative? How can we use this for our grift, our shtick? Oh, that's what it is. They were there to get element 115, you know. But it turns people on, it excites them, and so they would rather go with the opiate of, you know, the UFO religion.
I agree 100%. And like I was mentioning, the UFO documentaries do not do any justice. They're like a big, huge, they're like a cash grab for these. And I seen Jeremy Corbell at the Contact in the Desert this year.
Mm-hmm.
He was there, and guess what he was doing? He came in with a film crew of like 8 people that he was surrounded by.
Sure.
He walked through like he was a badass and had like all these people like filming him. And apparently he's doing like a Tubi UFO reality show.
Boy, there's the irony in that, right? UFO reality show. But there's a bunch of guys out there that just buy into that. They buy into posturing. They buy into cocksurety. You know, I like to remind people, if you haven't seen it, go look at the so-called debate that Jeremy Corbell did with Stanton Friedman. Now, whether you agree with Stanton Friedman or not, he was one of the nicest gentlemen in this community ever. He was a nice gentleman, and Corbell makes a complete a-hole of himself, disrespectful, all this spewing cocksurety crap, being insulting, you know, because he couldn't stand up to Friedman's, you know, Friedman's arguments and Friedman's comments. So instead, he tries to mock him, you know, in front of an audience. And last I heard, Corbell was all proud of that, and I found it to be just disgusting and shameful of a grown man doing that to, you know, a gentleman like Stanton Friedman. And this is the guy that they all, oh, all right, dude. You know, it just tells me as much about them as it does him. So go find that, because I think people want that suppressed. He's a complete, can I say a-hole?
Yeah, go ahead.
He's a complete asshole in this video. Complete. And I'm, you know, so I don't really care. To me, he's no better than Corey Good. And we know what a lying flop that guy turned out to be, and a terror for a while. So, you know, I'm not interested in hearing what Corbell has to say about anything, you know.
Which is interesting, because I have this clip that I want to play of George Knapp with an old school report that he was doing that is so interesting, that I'm going to show here in just a few minutes, that we're going to comment on. But first, Anthony from Official Class Channeling by Anthony sent in a $20 super sticker. Thank you very much, brother. Good friend of the show, Anthony. Go over there and subscribe to his channel. He's probably I personally believe one of the most honorable and integral people in the channeling community. Go over there and support him as well. But yes, there's this George Knapp old school radio program that he was doing that Mick West retweeted on his, he posted on his Twitter page. I thought this was so interesting, because it's completely different than the type of George Knapp that we get today. And it's like, here, actually, I'm just going to play it here. I'm going to put up the banner really quick. It's a really old broadcast, but you never know. They could hit you with something. But this is covered under fair use under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. This is, fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, and scholarship. And that's what we're going to be doing here today. YouTube Gods is commenting on this old school George Knapp video of him talking about aliens and UFOs. And we're going to pause periodically through to commenting on it, so that you know that this is fair use. Walter Bosley, can you let the YouTube algorithms know that this is fair use?
This is fair use, folks. Fair use. Purposes for criticism, comment, reporting, teaching, education. It's all fair use.
Awesome. Here we go.
Have long been associated with kooks and crackpots, and in many cases the association is right on the money. Some people get into the field to cash in. There are others who use UFOs for political reasons. George Knapp joins us now with part 5 of UFOs, the best evidence.
Pause here real quick so YouTube knows we're commenting on this. But man, George Knapp is so young here in this, this video. He's a super young man, but this is so interesting. This is wild. You're going to find this really interesting, Walter.
And Mary Ruth, the flim-flammery has been part of the UFO picture almost from the beginning. Con men have used the subject for their own ends many times. Lately, though, there's a new twist. Some UFO believers are using the ET phenomena as a means of whipping up public hysteria. They wrap themselves in the American flag, mix in a little old-time religion, and laugh all the way to the bank. As we'll see in tonight's report, some scientists believe there is a real body of data concerning UFOs. The question is, how will that data be used?
That's wild right there, because what he's saying that these people are doing is what he is currently doing right now.
Yeah. And particularly, notice he said wrapping themselves in the flag, the mix of patriotism and religious fervor. He said it right there. Revelation of method.
Yep. Here's Jacques Vallée, I think.
People who must have, people in Washington and elsewhere, must have a building full of data that I think the scientific community should have. Data that comes from radar, from sensors on Earth, from sensors in the ocean, and from sensors in space. Those sensors have been deployed for other reasons. For reconnaissance, for intelligence, for guidance, for communications, and so on. Those sensors are all over the place. And they must pick up the UFO phenomenon, because we know the energy constraints and the boundaries of the UFO phenomenon. It has to trigger those sensors. We know it does. So somebody has all that data.
Jacques Vallée is something of an anomaly, a solid scientist who thinks UFOs deserve to be studied. Vallée was a real-life model for the French scientist character in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
There's Close Encounters of the Third Kind right there. I like Jacques Vallée. I think that he is, he's changed his opinions a lot on the phenomenon as it's kind of gone on, but out of the group, I think he's kind of solid.
I agree with you. Jacques Vallée is one of the best. Personally, I think he did his best work by the early 90s. I don't agree with, and I find it interesting, the change that he has taken, particularly in recent years. But really, if you're not familiar with Jacques Vallée, folks, go look at his early work up till the early 90s, because talk about what they alluded to in the hearing. One of the few things that caught my ear that was worth listening to, when they said, hey, somebody else is kind of copying or flying around the same type of technology, and we don't know who the player is. And then think of my dad's story, this other group of people that share this planet with us. Vallée's work was going solidly down that line. The evidence and the data he was collecting and his analysis, I mean, even specified possibly who they were. And then in recent years, he took this, it's all the ET hypothesis turn. And okay, whatever. He kind of lost me when he did that.
Yeah, I agree.
But his work prior is solid. There you go. That's one.
That's one, yes.
Were among the first in the field to express concern that intelligence agencies might be spying on UFO groups. He was also among the first to notice that some of those who were preaching the UFO gospel were pursuing their own political agendas, using flying saucers to attract attention to other causes.
One explanation is that it's simply, there are people in society who have extreme beliefs of one kind or another, and that they gravitate towards extreme beliefs about UFOs and aliens and bases in, on Earth and so on, just as well as in politics. They gravitate to extreme beliefs.
Today,
that's so interesting. I think you might be referencing the Paul Benowitz case there with because he was the first person to talk about the Dulce base in New Mexico and the contract between aliens and extraterrestrials, which we have William Moore later on in this clip too, kind of talking. I did a whole couple of shows on William Moore and his talk to the MUFON conference in 1989, which is unreal. Wild what he was saying up there.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Keep going here.
These ET extremists out-tabloid the tabloids. These aliens aren't merely here to rape our women or steal our frogs. They want it all.
It's just that instead of the Illuminati, the Trilateralists, the Bilderbergers,
rape our women and steal our frogs, Walter.
I know the frogs and the women, but look how young Moore is there. By the time I met him in 2006, he long ponytail, white hair, white beard. He's an older guy. But yeah, frogs and women.
Frogs and women, those were the tabloids back then, and we don't have any of those types of tabloids anymore because people would probably actually believe it.
On that issue, there's a funny movie from the 90s called Real Men, titled Real Men, I think it is. I think that's the title. Jim Belushi plays a government agent. John Ritter plays an everyman who gets caught up in this secret agent intrigue, and it turns out that what's going on in the tabloids is exactly what the truth is. Check it out. It's a funny movie, Real Men.
Yeah, there's several things like that with Stanley Kubrick too that we also talk about in our movie A Clockwork Shining, that art imitating reality and reality imitating art, which is really wild and fascinating as well. Sure. Like with the Clockwork Orange, like how crime rose and there was like Clockwork Orange like murders in the UK, and then they actually had to pull the film because of the release of A Clockwork Orange. And then with Lolita, and the things that were surrounding Lolita, and then with The Shining and the torturous types of, what seems like some sort of CIA program that Stanley Kubrick is running on Shelley Duvall with the way that he treats her and tears her down. So it's really interesting, just the way that reality imitates art, or the opposite way, or art imitates reality.
There's the Rothschilds, the world bankers, and on and on and on, being in a plot to take over the planet and enslave the world and make a fortune in the process. Now it's the aliens who are overseeing the whole process, and they're doing it.
Wow, is that not a revelation or what? What he just said right there? That is exactly what's happening. Before all the alien stuff, people were worried about humans doing this to other humans, and then they shift the focus into aliens, and now it's aliens now.
That's
It's like this
right.
boogeyman type scenario.
Yeah. Bill Cooper.
Yeah. Oh, this gets wild, dude. This gets so wild.
The most vocal of today's cosmic doomsayers is Bill Cooper, a former Navy petty officer who says he read and copied top-secret military documents which outline an incredibly complex plot involving international bankers, industrialists, politicians, drug cartels, the CIA, and of course the aliens. Cooper's first televised unveiling of this grand conspiracy came in a 1989 appearance with John Lear on the talk program On the Record.
We are in possession of alien technology, which we have actually, in effect, traded human lives and property for. There is a formal treaty, which is illegal under the Constitution, with this alien nation.
Which he got from Paul Benowitz, which was all mis and disinformation given to him directly by the Air Force and by the NSA. This is pretty much a hit piece on Bill Cooper here, which is so wild that this is George Knapp doing this hit piece like this.
Speaking of irony.
It's wild. All right, we're going to keep going.
Everything about it is illegal, and to tell you the truth, in my estimation, just stinks rotten. Like John, after this MUFON conference is over, I think I'm going to get out of this too.
But he didn't get out of it. Instead, he jumped into it with both feet. Cooper soon became the featured speaker at UFO lectures all over the West. A January 1989 appearance at the Showboat Hotel in Las Vegas drew 700 people at $10 a head, or $15 at the door. This promotional material...
Man, could you imagine getting into a conference now for $10 or $15? Holy shit.
Yeah, I know. Jeez.
Sorry, I got to pause
Nice.
before, because if I don't and I'm not talking over it, then it's an opportunity for them to do some shit.
proclaimed Petty Officer Cooper to be the nation's foremost expert on UFOs. Who's responsible for this designation?
It seems that people, in listening to what I have to say and what others have to say, have made their own determination on that fact. Never, at any point, have I ever made such a statement.
As the audiences grew, so did the story. Cooper's thesis, titled The Secret Government, grew from a modest 5 pages in January 1989 to a much heftier 28 pages by May of 1989. In the earlier version, Cooper pledged that this was it. There would be no additions or corrections.
He swore, part of the statement, I swear that this information is true, all true. 2 weeks later, he changed the story and swore that was true.
And they all believed
Then he changed it again and swore that was true. Then he started suddenly assimilating information which he got from other researchers and other individuals and incorporating that into his story and claiming that it was part of the material that he had seen in 1972.
If that doesn't explain the entire community right there, I don't know what does.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how. I mean, Lou has done similar shiftings, and they're like, "Oh, Lou, he's our man." You know, whatever he says is fine. It's like Muhammad with Islam. You know how if Muhammad wanted to do something, oh, the angel came and told me I could do it. You know, and even his initial guys were like, what? And so it's change as you go, because your hardcore true believers will go with you.
And that's how cults work too. They just change up the doctrine when something doesn't fit, or they get caught up with something, and then they just say that God or the freaking Brotherhood of Light told me that this is not true, and then they just change up their whole script.
According to the Cooper scenario, humans have...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and if you speak against it, then what they do is they turn the believers against you. Oh, you're not one of us. He's not one of us. Shun him.
Yep.
We've had a base on the moon since the 1950s, another on Mars since the 1960s. We've recovered dozens of crashed disks and scores of alien bodies. The aliens are here to use us for food and genetic experiments, including mass sterilization, which is why we must hang on to our guns and oppose birth control. George Bush is in on it, so is Henry Kissinger, the Vatican, and most of the nation's leading scientists. John Kennedy was assassinated because he was going to blow the whistle on the drugs and saucers connection. Bill Moore, Stan Friedman, Philip Klass, John Lear, Bob Lazar, and anyone else who questions Cooper's credibility have been written off as agents of MJ-12 and thus part of the plot. So what's the motive?
Get rich quick, where he's making thousands and thousands of dollars going around the country. He was in Atlanta last week and charged $50 a plate for people to have dinner with him so they could ask him questions. You know, the man is, in my opinion, based on the research that I've done about him, and I don't mind saying this on camera, let him sue if he wants to challenge it. I'd love to have him in court. In my opinion, he's a total phony. Total phony.
I don't know why I love this so much, but it's just so great. It's so great. William Moore is the man. I wish I could get a hold. I wish someone knew where to find him.
I'll try to, see if we can, make, because I haven't seen him in years. I'd kind of like to, I met him through Greg Bishop. Greg Bishop known him longer than I have, and he's a very interesting guy. Very interesting.
I would love to see because everything that he was saying here in this clip, and then also in his 1989 MUFON conferences, like all come to fruition. Like it's the exact same thing that he was saying in that time. I would love to know what he thinks about all this now.
I have a Bill Moore story real quick. During when I was really looking into my dad's story years before I wrote the book, Greg had told Bill about what I told him about my dad's story, and Bill wanted to meet one time, so he and I met at a Dupars at the Grove in Fairfax in LA, and he was really keenly interested in my dad's story. And when I told him about the part where the intelligence officer came from the forward cabin and told my dad and the other guys that they were going to write Pat, he said, was that guy's name Major Knight? And I said, I don't know. And Bill Moore, this is in 2006 or 7, says 2006, because my dad was assaulted in 2007 and spent the last year of his life in a hospital dying. But in 2006, Bill said, ask your dad what that guy's name was. I'd be interested to know if it was a guy named Major Milton Knight. And so I said, okay, I will. So then a couple days later, I had lunch with my dad. And yes, I know how to question. I know how to interrogate people with it looking like it's just an old conversation because, they train us to do that. So I'm talking to my dad, and I use my tactic on him. And, I kind of Barney Fifed it a little. It's like, Dad, a couple years back, you were telling me about the officer on the plane, a major somebody. And my dad said, oh yeah, Major Knight, Milton Knight.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, okay, what the hell's going on here? So I told Bill, I said, he nailed it. He said the name. And so, that whole Milton Knight thing could have been part of a narrative. If it was not true, it could have been part of a narrative, or maybe Milton Knight's a real guy. I haven't yet been able to nail that down, but it was weird. I got that name from Bill Moore, who never met my dad, as far as I know, in 2006, and asked me to ask him about that. And my dad said, I didn't have to prompt him. My dad said the name. I prompted him, but not with the name. So for what that's worth,
how would he have known that? Like that's
if it wasn't the name of the guy. So
absolutely. But I would love to speak with him. If there's any way you can, if you know where he is, or you can put me in contact with him at all, I would love to do it.
Well, let me ask you, how much money do you make in what you do, and how much do you expect to make? I don't think it's anybody's business but my own.
Cooper insists his information came from reports he read in 1972. Moore points out some of the documents included in Cooper's thesis contain entries from 1974, 75, and beyond, and thus couldn't have been read by anyone in 72.
When I first met him a couple years ago, he said he could vouch for 50% of what I was saying. Since then, Bill apparently can vouch for 150% of what I'm saying.
John
That's astounding. That's pretty good.
Wow, how did you go from 50% to 150%?
Yeah.
What kind of top secret documents were you reading? What kind of nonsense were you making up? Did you like John Lear? Did you think that he was credible?
Lear, the thing in the more recent years, there was some wild and crazy stuff that he was purporting was true that I'm just like, again, along the lines of, okay, maybe there's a nugget there, but the extent to which I think he said people were living on the moon or just all sorts of stuff, I couldn't agree with. But I think when he first started out, he was, trying to keep it reasonable. But
yeah, like a lot of people do, they start out with good intentions and then they evolve into wackadoo fairy tale stories.
Lear was instrumental in bringing Cooper out of the UFO closet, but even Lear now questions Cooper's claims. In 1988, Lear helped an acquaintance compile and write a UFO paper under a pseudonym, O.H. Krill. The name is an inside UFO joke. Krill is supposedly the name of the first alien to communicate with humans.
This is wild right here. You're going to love this.
The O.H.
If you don't already know about it.
Well, yeah, our friend Olaf Phillips has published the Krill book.
This is wild right here.
Thin air. But later, during an interview program, Lear says Cooper stated otherwise.
Just out of the corner of my ear, I heard Cooper talking about O.H. Krill. And God, I turned beet red, and I grabbed him and I walked into the living room. I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "About what?" And I said, "O.H. Krill's a joke. We invented that for some papers." He said, No, I saw that in the Navy. I said, "That's impossible, Bill. You couldn't have possibly seen that in the Navy. We came up with that last year." So that's one.
Cooper's paper states that the
I didn't know that. I didn't know that was like an inside joke between these people. That's a wild one.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. I'm glad you're showing this because the new generation of these fanatical UFO true believers that we're talking about, they don't know all this stuff. Their grasp of ufology history starts in 2017. Okay. And they don't realize that all the same stuff they're embracing has been the crap that is recycled and it has been tried to, they've tried to sell it to us before, and it was proven. Lazar himself was a sham who was disproven years ago, and Corbell and Knapp revived him. And because there was enough time and a whole new generation, all right, dude, willing to buy into it.
I think that's been a big problem too, is all the newcomers to the phenomenon that has absolutely no idea about the history of it and how it all began. And William Cooper up at that MUFON UFO conference in 1989 said, and he brought it together perfectly, and I did a show on it's called Legends of Ufology. William Cooper, it's a playlist on my channel.
Mm-hmm.
He gets up there and he says, if you strip away everything from ufology, and he's talking up to the point to 1989 when this was going on, he's like, if you strip away everything from ufology, you're left with the Paul Benowitz case. He's saying that everything stemmed, all of the theories and all of the speculations surrounding ufology all tracks back to Paul Benowitz. And I think that he's 100% spot on there too. But William Cooper also is responsible for a lot of the Roswell nonsense too, with his book on Roswell that came out in 1980. So he's got some hand in the mythology and the posture sizing of the community with lore and fantasy as well.
Yeah. We know that Doty was the OSI agent that is involved in the whole Benowitz affair thing. Read Greg Bishop's book, Project Beta, for that. And here's the thing. The stuff that Benowitz was told, a lot of untrue, ridiculous things, right? Initially. Doty's specialty for a while in OSI was the specialty I had, which was counterespionage operations. And in what you call passage material, it's double agent ops, what you call passage material, there is stuff that's not true. There is disinformation. There is fake mixed with real, okay? Because what you're trying to do, this is aimed at foreign intelligence services, okay? Foreign intelligence agencies, all right? Enemies or nations of concern, whatever. And you're trying to lead them astray so their stuff doesn't work. So that is a level of disinformation. So, it doesn't surprise me that, disinformation was kind of used in whatever the specific operation was that Doty got approved doing with Benowitz. I want to bring that up, the emphasis on this was aimed at foreign intelligence services, because I always come across people in the community who want to spew venom at me and curse me to hell because, all counterintelligence agents are liars and they just spread disinfo to the people. And I never once, anytime I dealt with any tweaking of that, it was never once aimed at the American public. It was aimed at agents of the GRU and in Russia, or China. It was never, and all CI counterintelligence agents, their job is not to spread disinformation. It can be a part of a specific assignment that a counterintelligence guy will do. But this characterization of all counterintelligence is just to, lead the public astray. That's ignorance, and it spins people up. But if you want the best presentation on the whole Benowitz affair, read Greg Bishop's book, Project Beta, and you'll see that the real culprit was not OSI, it was the NSA. But
absolutely, the NSA was involved. And I had Rick Doty on my show too, a couple of, I don't know, 7 months ago or so, and we had a really good conversation, which he's all for the extraterrestrial hypothesis and all that, which
because they're real. But the ET religion hypothesis is.
But I gave him a break because I'm like, the way that people it's exactly like what you just said. The people that characterize, counterintelligence agents for going out and purposefully confirming or denying something is not true. They don't do that. And that's why I gave him a break. I was like, you weren't there telling Paul Benowitz that these were for sure extraterrestrials or whatever. You were just kind of being like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. What you got there, Paul? Let me take a look at it. Let me blah, 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 blah. You never confirmed or denied anything about his theories. And a big part of that was the NSA and breaking into his home and replacing his laptop with an NSA modified laptop to make him believe that he was in communication with extraterrestrial aliens.
And they were also using technological phenomena of audio and surveillance equipment to convince him that there was weird alien tech going on. The NSA did horrible things to this man. And they're all too happy to let OSI take the rap on it. I know that organization, and I'll tell you, when I got in OSI, I've only talked with Rick Doty once a few years ago. I never met him, but he was presented to me as a cautionary tale. Walter, you're going to do stuff. You're going to do this operation connected with UFO stuff. You're going to be careful. You're going to do it within the regulations. And Rick Doty was presented to me as a cautionary tale because of the Benowitz affair. Okay. And I guarantee you, OSI Command was not happy with what happened with that. They were not happy with the, bad reflection, on them and the Air Force, because they did not tell Rick Doty to drive this man crazy. And as Rick told you, right? He wasn't.
Well, he wouldn't have been looked at like that if the operation went good. You know, if the operation didn't kind of go bad and didn't drive Paul Benowitz out of his mind in order and be locked up in mental institutions and have psychiatric care on him, he wouldn't have been looked at as like a cautionary tale. If it went okay, and I 100% believe if the NSA was not involved, which according to Rick Doty, he wasn't aware until
after
almost the investigation was completely over on Paul Benowitz that the NSA was even involved.
Yep.
Now that's just what he says.
Well, it's in Greg Bishop's book too, Project Beta. Go check it out.
Yeah. All right, let's finish up this clip.
Of his story have been independently verified by two sources, one of whom is Tony Pelham, reporter for the now defunct Las Vegas Bullet newspaper.
I personally believe that Bill Cooper is a complete fraud and that he's read a lot of UFO books and he took advantage of charging $10 and $15 a person to give some lectures, which a lot of people will pay to listen to.
Pelham says he found bits and pieces of Cooper's background that checked out, but there was no confirmation of the big stuff. For instance, Cooper's copy of the 1972 documents.
Now, Cooper explained to me that his set of documents he had stored while he was living in California in a garage storage area behind his home. And he said a mysterious fire destroyed them. And as a reporter at the time, I said, well, fine, just simply give me the location and the date, the address, and I'll verify with the fire department that a fire took. And he became angry and said, no, I don't want to get anybody else. And I said, well, how could this hurt anyone for me to verify the date and place of a fire?
Cooper insists his story.
Because the fire didn't happen, bro. That's
ding, ding, ding. Yeah. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
These are true. Those who disagree, he says, are dupes of the secret government. Former associates like John Lear, who dare to question Cooper's material, receive unsettling messages on their answering machines.
Yeah, John, this is Bill Cooper. You know, I really don't know how to express my anger, but I'll tell you right now, I told you a long time ago, anybody that attacks me is going to get crucified. And mister, I've always been very, very kind to you, and you know it. But my patience has run out. I hope you have a good flight.
What kind of ominous threat is that? I hope you have a good flight.
Corey Good, you know, he took his thing from the Bill Cooper playbook, I guess. You know, anyone who speaks out against me is gonna, face my wrath. Wow.
Yep.
Well, we know what happened to Bill Cooper,
Yep, that's exactly right. And but that's another trick and a common thing within the community as well, within even the conspiracy community and the truther community too, is when you hear something that you don't like, you automatically label them as, working for the dark side, working for the cabal, working for the dark alliance, you're an agent, you're working for the CIA, you're a part of the problem, you're the government.
Or the evil OSI.
Yeah, that's the easiest way to try and discredit somebody that is 100% rational and has common sense.
Yeah, it's what a religious fundamentalist does, right? You have to be labeled a heretic. You have to be shunned. This is exactly what cults do. This is what some cults that operate under the label of a church do. This is what narcissistic cult leaders. This is what they have to do because they have to keep their control over the herd. And that, Bill Cooper had a herd for a while that he could depend on buying tickets to see him. I mean, back then, $50 was like what, 150 now, just to have lunch with this guy,
He's a UFO superstar, Walter Bosley. That's what they do. That's what George Knapp charges. He charges like $250 to have lunch and dinner at these conferences with people.
And Ryder, you and I are just jealous because, we don't command $150, plate to have lunch with us. You and I we'll meet up over $20 Thai food. At a little joint, like we did,
Absolutely.
And
which was delicious, by the way.
Yeah, you don't need to spend $100, folks. You don't need to spend $100 or even $50 to have lunch with Walter Bosley. Okay. Just let me, we've already met with one guy in town at mine and Malia's favorite Indian place in town. So, we'll just go Dutch and I'll meet with you, talk all day long.
Absolutely. That's the fun part of being. Oh, Scotty Boy says, was Bill Cooper the one that choked himself? No, that's not Bill Cooper. Bill Cooper I think he was shot by, was it tax agents that was coming?
Tax agents.
Yes.
Yeah. He decided to get in a shootout with the feds, and he lost that one. Scotty Boy's referring to Phil Schneider, who, you know what, my view on the Schneider thing, I think it was a tragic tale. I think the man did rig it up, and he had issues, and the true believers don't want to believe that. And that's okay. It's kind of like Mark McCandlish. There were some folks in the community that initially tried to spin that into a conspiracy, and no, that got shut down quick. Mark was one of the nicest people you'd ever meet, and the man had issues, and this happens. Just like Morris Jessup. Morris Jessup, if you go to the A Saucer Life podcast, and there's an excellent couple of episodes about Morris Jessup, and you learn the real truth about Morris K. Jessup. And but yeah, Bill Cooper, being a fathead, stubborn fathead, cocksurety extreme, gets himself, in a gunfight with federal agents. He probably bought a revolver to a machine gun fight. I don't know, but he didn't.
Yeah, but no, that's not what it was. It was because they took him out because he was revealing the truth about the aliens and the UFOs, Walter. That's what it was.
Oh, I feel ashamed. I've been corrected. Can I rejoin the cult?
But that's what they say, though. It is so wild. That's the excuse that they'll spin on it. But Phil Schneider, it turned out that Phil Schneider was the guy that didn't have a hand, right? That said that he got it blown off by an alien laser beam underneath while he was building a base in New Mexico.
I remember the stuff about building a base. I don't recall the hand thing. But
yeah, he had a missing hand, and he said that he got it blown off by an alien laser beam that attacked them whenever they were trying to build this base or whatever. But it turned out that he had lost his hand in a welding accident or some kind of other thing and that it had been gone for a really long time. I don't know. Wild, these things that people will make up.
Yeah, and it's for
Call this
attention,
a prediction,
or money, and the ones who do it for attention, and end up like Phil or Morris Jessup or so. It's sad. I don't mock Schneider. I don't mock Jessup because those are tragic tales.
All right, let's finish this bad boy up. Here is George Knapp. This is a report by George Knapp. Mind you guys, this is all his thing. This is a hit piece basically on William Cooper.
But it probably won't be all that long until Eyewitness News is accused of being part of the secret government conspiracy as well because of this report. The tragedy in things like this is that well-meaning people who are genuinely curious about the topic are misled and frightened, and any hope that the topic might be given more serious consideration is tossed right out the window. As Bill Moore put it, it plays right into the hands of those who really don't want the subject to be treated fairly.
How does one tell the difference between somebody who's really...
Ryder, I want to comment on this. You know what? Think of A Clockwork Orange. George Knapp needs to be strapped to a chair with the eye holders open and forced to watch his own video on this.
100% agree. What happened, George?
Yeah.
What happened, bud?
Money and attention. Look, here's a spotlight I'm turning on me. Spotlight and money. That's what happened to George Knapp.
Wild. I was shocked when I watched. So you're getting the first reaction. I only watched it through once, and I was like, this is a perfect thing to bring up with Walter because it's so unbelievable. And you're getting the shock of it just as I got the shock of it when I was watching it a couple of days ago.
Yeah, he needs to take his own advice.
Absolutely, 100%.
Really for real and somebody who isn't.
Really boils down to common sense. I mean, there really isn't that much in this field that's known for sure. So when you run into somebody who has a whole bunch of stuff that is treated as the absolute truth or presented in that fashion, you have to be wary. The same might be true, though, for those who say absolutely no way that there's anything to UFOs.
And
more next week.
I was going to say, you'll be back Monday.
Getting into the abduction hypothesis and some of the chicanery that goes on in that field and a number of other topics as well.
Okay. Thank you, George.
Sure.
Wow.
Wild, huh? Wild.
Yeah, he's right. The chicanery that goes on in the abduction world, here's the thing. And I know, that my final assessment is people tend to think, because I will criticize a lot, that I don't believe that I'm completely a non-believer in ET. I don't believe abductions have or do happen. Here's the thing, folks. I think on a base level, nugget of truth level, a lot of these things have happened and do happen. The thing is, I don't buy every story that comes down the pike. And you can't, because that's where the disinformation is slipped in. That's where the people who basically are just liars and con men, that's how they get in. They take something that has some truth in it and they put their own spin on it and they exaggerate it wildly. And, they want you to buy into it, and you just shouldn't. You need to use some critical thinking in each case.
Yeah, there's this really good documentary on Netflix. It's called The Manhattan Alien Abduction, and I highly recommend people check it out. And it basically tells the story of Bud Hopkins and this one of the most famous abduction cases that happened in Manhattan. And Bud Hopkins' wife is on there, and it's just really good. I wish I could have had her on my show, but she passed away a year ago, and I was really upset about that because I wanted to have her on to talk about all this stuff, because she was basically filming Bud Hopkins whenever he was doing all these regressions on people. And she was a filmmaker herself, and she filmed all of them. And I don't want to spoil it, but it's basically Bud Hopkins got fooled by this lady.
I've seen this one, and you're right. This is required watching if you want to be honest with yourself and take an honest look at, a big story in the community. Yeah, this is a very eye-opening documentary.
I loved it. I think that wraps it up for us here today, Walter. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your time, and thanks for being in my documentary, A Clockwork Shining. And let's do some more stuff in the future, my friend. Can you let people know where to find you, and also plug your online conference again?
Okay, the Transtemporal, which means across time, folks. Transtemporal Cosmic Mysteries online conference, $40 if you use Cosmic Ryder, Ryder's name, one word, Cosmic Ryder, all caps. You get 10% off that ticket. It's on Saturday, March 8th. It's got Joseph Farrell, Joshua Cutchin, myself, Malia Grimm, and we're going to have a couple of soon to be named, mystery guests in there. And I'm going to be live inside Disneyland for my segments. And you can find this at walterbosley.com, where you can find my new podcast. There's several like teens, like 20 episodes, I think, on the transtemporal cosmic topic. Go in there. Joseph Farrell's in several of them. Joshua Cutchin. Go in there, get a subscription to the podcast, and just check everything out. My books are there. walterbosley.com. You can find all this stuff. And the tickets, there's going to be a limit to how many tickets we can sell for this webinar in March. So you want to get your tickets as soon as possible. But thank you, Ryder, for having me here. And thank you so much for having me in A Clockwork Shining. A brilliant piece of work.
Thank you very much. I just dropped the link to the live webinar in the chat, and it's also in the description of this video. Please go over there and support them. Some really great speakers are going to be on that live webinar, and appreciate everyone in the chat. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. And please watch A Clockwork Shining on Amazon Prime and on Apple TV Plus. The link is pinned to the chat. It's also in the description of this video. And thank you, everyone in the chat. Really appreciate you guys. And you'll get 10%. Scotty Boy says 10% off what? You'll get 10% off the sales price if you click the link that I just dropped in here. I'll just drop it one more time just for you guys, which is the live webinar with Walter Bosley, Dr. Joseph Farrell, and who else is on it?
Joshua Cutchin. Check out his book, Ecology of Souls. It's a masterpiece. Malia Grimm, and again, myself and 2 other speakers that we're going to announce soon. So
yes, go check that out. And if you use Cosmic Ryder, all caps, you'll get 10% off those tickets. All right, guys. Thank you guys very much. See you guys next time.